Welcome, Todd.
Hi.
Hi.
It's good to see you.
So good to
and
see
be here
you.
with you.
This is crazy because I remember, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now, going on walks when I was separated from Chuck a couple years before the divorce, spiraling, and we would walk and things were just so different then, but you were either working on your book or you were working on the concept of your book. And now your book is out.
And now it's here.
And it's so good.
Thank you.
I texted him earlier when I finished reading and I was just like, whoa, like so good. Not to like ass kiss or anything, but I truly mean it.
I mean, that means a lot to hear you say that. Like I was saying, I'm like, I don't actually expect my friends to read the book, but when they do, it means a lot. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. So the book is called How to Love Someone Without Losing Your Mind.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, you're going to lose your fucking mind.
I love it. And this is something that I really love and appreciate about you and your content. And I think that it's part of like why you're so successful, because you're saying the things that a lot of people don't say. You know, we hear a lot of these platitudes and these rules and everything around dating and relationships. And you just are more accepting, I think, and more flexible when it comes to relationships and dating and the reality of it, which is that like it triggers us and we are going to lose our minds, right?
Yeah, it's really triggering. I'm triggered right now.
Do you want to talk about it?
No, I don't want to talk about it. But yeah, I mean, relationships are really hard. And a lot of the advice out there that we are bombarded with is really aspirational and idealizing when relationships are really not that.
Yeah, I think you said in the beginning of your book that a life in love will make you lose your mind, but it's also your greatest teacher.
Yeah.
That's paraphrasing. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think so often we're told that we learn the most about ourselves alone, or that we heal alone, or that we do our best work alone. And I think the reality, I don't agree with that. I think we learn the most about ourselves in the context of our relationships. And that can be any kind of relationship, but for me and for many of my clients, we learn so much about who we are with a romantic adult partner. And from there, we can really grow a lot more, I think, than we can if we are just alone, which is really counterintuitive and in contrast to a lot of the advice that we hear lately about independence and how independence is like the gold standard of being a person. Don't be too dependent, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I think that the most growth to be had at times, if you're open to it, is in the context of our relationships.
The idea that you need to love yourself and you need to be okay with yourself before you can be in a relationship. Is that kind of in the same vein, or is that different?
Well, I mean, the phrase you're talking about is how you're going to love yourself, or you have to
love someone if you don't love yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that to be true. I think the relationship we have with ourselves is really important, and the relationships we have with others is really important. And they both work together to form our world. And it's not one or the other, it's both. So like, I would encourage people to really work on the relationship with themselves so they can have a better relationship with others. But if you're not having relationships with others, you're not working on your relationship with yourself. So it's kind of a simultaneous piece of art that we have to work on that's really hard. But the idea that you can't experience love unless you have self-love is like kind of capitalistic. It's just kind of like, here, buy these things so you love yourself more and then you'll be ready for love. But sometimes people learn how to love themselves by falling in love and seeing someone else love them. And that's totally valid. And sometimes people learn how to love themselves on their own. That's valid too. But I try to stay away from these rules of you can't do this if you don't do that. It doesn't really work like that.
Yeah.
I wish it did though. Like how amazing would it be if our lives were that simple?
Yeah.
Whereas like we just follow these rules. We first learn how to love ourselves and then we love someone else and then bippity boppity boo. It's like happiness forever. I wish.
Well, you kind of talked about that in your book too, because you disclose a lot about your first relationship with your ex, Alex. And that was a really formative thing for you. And you even acknowledged him and his family in the end of the book because you said, you know, it taught you about love and family and all of that. But, you know, you also talk about how I think you had the expectation maybe that you would break up, you'd start dating, and then you'd find the one and bippity boppity boo. And that's,
I thought it would be so easy.
And that's what other people think too. And you talk about like how we think we have two options, right?
Yeah.
But there's actually there's a third, but there are other options. So what was your experience like when you were leaving that relationship, and what has it been like dating? Like, how have you used this in your own life?
Yeah, it's been fucking awful. I mean, it hasn't been awful. I mean, like, I really grew into myself. Like, I learned so much about myself through dating, through figuring out who I was, because I spent, from 20 to 30 with Alex, and I was, a we, and we made decisions together, and making decisions on my own was completely alien to me. So, like, I learned a lot about myself, etc. But one, ending the relationship was fucking excruciating, which is something that nobody tells you or prepares you for. Like, no information whatsoever. And not excruciating just in, oh, wow, that conversation was painful and now I'm in grief. Excruciating as in like a long drawn out process. Sometimes that starts years before the relationship even ends. Sometimes even before that's where you're going. A process that starts with a lot of suffering and unhappiness and disconnection, and then maybe working on it. A lot of internal I mean, like, I could go on and on, but it's really fucking hard, basically. And then I got to the place that I know you and so many of my clients and friends and people get to, where we finally make the decision to do it. And then at times that isn't the end, then we can get back together. There's a lot of ending and getting back together. And then finally it ended. And then it was like crash, boom, chaos, and a lot of grief. And like you were saying, and I was saying in the book, that I thought it would be easy to just start dating again and meet somebody. And it really wasn't. Everything was hard. Like, everything was hard. But I don't think everybody has that experience. It was just specific to me. And this is something I write about in the book that's really important in all of our lives, no matter what it is. But the context really shapes how we experience relational endings, job loss, everything. Who we are, our identity, who our family is, if we speak to them, our gender, our race, like literally everything about what we experience in our cultural context, our geographical context, our context is going to really shape it. So for me, it was really difficult just because of my context. I wasn't speaking to my family really at all. There was a lot of other shit going on. And so there wasn't anything to really hold me and make me feel grounded anywhere. But, for many people, they do have a good community of friends, a good close-knit family, whatever. And the blow is not that difficult. But for me, it was really hard. Now, I feel like I'm going on and on about how terrible it was.
I think that's so important, though, for people to hear, because I think that there is this idea that, you break up, maybe you mourn for a little bit, and then you dust yourself off. Maybe you learn to love yourself. You do the journaling and the meditation, and you go on the retreat, and then you're like ready to get out there and you meet your person.
And then it's done.
And then it's the happy ending. And there are so many different versions of that. And I mean, I was smiling and nodding my head because you know what I went through with my ex. And I don't think people really talk about that. And I don't think people realize, like,
it's like death. People don't talk about death.
Yeah.
People don't talk about relational endings.
Yes. And when the relationship is ending years before it actually ends, like, I just know for myself, that turmoil was unbearable. It was really unbearable. And the more I tried to stuff it down and ignore it and avoid it and kind of rationalize things and bargain with myself, like, well, I'm getting this, so if I'm not getting that, then it doesn't really mean, and I can still be happy if this, but like
clinging to something to try to feel better, to try to solve your pain away.
Yeah. But it was like this chasm was created between like the life that I was living and the life that I desired to live, and like what I was thinking, and then what the reality of my life was, and that created so much turmoil, and that was awful. Yeah. And I think people think about relationships ending as the pain point. And for me, like, the relationship ending was painful, but not the most painful thing.
It's a long, drawn out process. It really is. And what I found interesting while I was writing this book is I kind of like stumbled upon something that's kind of obvious, but I don't know. I thought it was interesting, like, that culturally we do a lot to celebrate love, like Valentine's Day and anniversaries and weddings, and like love itself, like, is every song. Like, we do nothing to celebrate the end of a relationship. We don't even talk about it. Yet, like, when we meet somebody, we fall in love, it's the beginning of a new life. When we end a relationship, it's a new life. It's the same kind of process that we go through. We become a different person, both in a beginning and in an ending. It's literally the same exact process that we go through, but we like pretend like it's not a big deal, no information, and it just makes people suffer more, which is a big bummer because like it's during a time where there's one, tremendous growth, and two, people need a lot of support and information.
Yeah.
Not so much.
I was going to ask you, was writing the book cathartic for you at all because you were examining the relationship maybe in a different way?
Yes and no. I was writing the book, and I write about this in the book, in a complete tailspin with my ex. We had stayed friends for a really long time, and it was a boundaryless friendship, which really got in the way of a lot of other things, different story. But so it was really hard for me to try to separate myself from him while having to write every day about it. But net, like the experience of writing, the experience of kind of bringing all of my memories and experiences together and trying to make sense of it was really powerful for me, which has just been an extension of my own therapy and what being a therapist is like. So writing the book was like therapy, kind of.
Something that I love that you talked about was your sensitive brake system.
Yeah.
And I remember I was dying laughing. Yeah.
You read it.
Because you were talking about kind of this idea that you had what dating would be like and then what it was really like. Yeah. And you were talking about like
similarly with sex, and it just wasn't.
Yeah, and odors. And I remember
oh my God,
being on a
smell.
I remember.
Who knew?
I remembered you saying that. So you and I were on a walk 2 years ago, and we were talking about dating. And I had that idealized version, I think, of dating. Like, oh, I'm gonna get on Hinge and Raya, and it's gonna be all hot guys, and I'm gonna have like hot random sex, and they're gonna like smell good, and it's gonna be amazing. And you were like, no, there's like smells and like hygiene. I remember you saying that. Yeah. So funny.
It is funny and shocking.
Yeah.
But people smell and they make weird noises, and if you don't know them, they become that smell and weird noise. So you don't have any kind of backstory or relational information. They are like the smelly guy or the guy that like comes and squeaks, you know.
Oh God.
But it's a real
That's a real
person. Okay. Yeah. Which is totally fine, but like I didn't know him. So he was only the guy that came and squeaked.
Yeah. Again, context is important. Knowing somebody.
The relational
Yeah. What are some myths around dating? Because, you know, you talk a lot about like being clingy and kind of abandoning these rules. So what are some of those rules that you think we need to re-examine or leave behind?
I mean, the clingy thing, the attached thing is a problem. All of this shit about don't be clingy, don't get attached, don't put yourself out there, which is completely counterproductive if you want to form a connection. But in terms of the rules of dating, I think about it more like people that talk about don't have sex on the first date, don't like rules about moving in together or how fast people take things or how slow people take things or texting or all of these things that we think are facts, like, or some people think are facts.
Well, let's talk about like time frames, because I think that that is so common.
Yeah.
And
there's so much judgment. It's crazy.
And I was talking about this on my other episode, I think, and I was telling you before that I'm seeing somebody, but I got divorced in January. It was official in February. I started dating this guy in the end of January.
Which I think is great.
Yeah. But I was like, I had all these rules where I was like, no, I'm not going to be serious for this long because I need to be on my own for this amount of time, like making up these arbitrary things. And, you know, I've talked about it before, and, you know, like the unraveling of my other relationship, that was a long drawn out process. So it wasn't like we were engaged in this passionate, you know, marriage where it was like,
before they end.
Yeah. So, you know, in some ways I feel like I was kind of alone for a long time before we ultimately got divorced. But I had those rules too. And then one day I was like, Ariel, this is like an amazing person. You know, all of the qualities that I would be looking for in a partner. So like, why am I making up rules around this? But I think everybody does that. And we have this idea in our head that things need to be slow and we need to take time. So is there ever a time, like what gives you as a therapist a red flag when it comes to
timing?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Oh.
I mean, I'm less concerned with like timing. People also ask me a lot about demographics. Like they're this many years older than me or younger than me. timing about getting into a relationship right after ending one. I'm less concerned with those kind of demographics and contexts and more so concerned with who people are. Because, what we want are satisfying relationships that are healthy, whatever the fuck healthy means, but, that feel good. And so, that's actually has nothing to do with age differences or timing. It has more to do with if you're able to do work on yourself in the relationship and if your partner is able to do work on themselves and in the relationship. It has to do with the effort you put into a relationship. It doesn't matter if you got divorced on the first and met him on the second and started dating him on the third and moved in him on that. It doesn't nothing matters really in terms of like the timing or any demographic or contextual issues, so long as you're feeling good about it and you're trying. The things that give me red flag are people that are like, I don't go to therapy, I don't read books, I don't listen to podcasts, I don't go to yoga, I don't breathe deeply, like I don't do anything and I just kind of go with the flow. That freaks me the fuck out. But if you're, reflective and you're a little analytical and you're mindful about things, like that's great. Like then, I think you're in control. You're in the driver's seat, like whatever control means. But you get what I'm saying is that people are really looking for some of these rules. And we all want a roadmap. And the roadmap isn't necessarily a demographic or timing. The roadmap is, I think, self-awareness, compromise, tolerance, forgiveness, some kind of therapy, healing, wellness plan, emotional intelligence, like that kind of stuff. Because that's actually what makes our lives satisfying. It's what makes relationships satisfying. It's what makes sex feel good. So while I can't think of the specific rules beyond timing and demographics, my focus is more on satisfaction and awareness and mindfulness and intention, stuff like that.
Is that how you would define a healthy relationship?
It would define a healthy relationship in terms of obviously a lack of, I've learned that I have to say this from being on social media, but a lack of abuse, not abusive, not manipulative, no gaslighting and all of that stuff. But a relationship that's good enough where people are mostly satisfied, where there's some level of communication that's productive and helpful, some level of a desire to please one another, to fulfill each other's needs.
That's something that you talk about that's controversial, and that is a relationship that's good enough and kind of forgetting about the fairy tale. And you talk in your book about
which is
like
funny
settling.
That's controversial.
Yeah.
People are like, I'm not settling for that shit. He's like, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
I'm
But
like,
that's
okay.
People like, I don't know. I feel like the people that take issue with that are just projecting their own stuff.
Their unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
People have a lot of trauma and they want rules or they don't want to settle or they have certain expectations that are unrealistic. And it's a defensive space because they're anxious and they want to protect themselves, which is okay. But yeah, the good enough relationship, I didn't come up with that. I mean, it's something that has been in literature for a long time, but people really want perfection. They wouldn't say perfection, but good enough isn't good enough.
But how do you know what's good enough?
What feels good enough? I mean, everybody has a different level for what they can tolerate, right? So for some people, they need certain needs fulfilled. And if those needs are fulfilled, then that's good enough. I would say like 60-40, 70-30.
Okay. I remember being in my marriage towards the end, and I was like, if it was even like 51-49, I wouldn't even be like thinking about this right now.
But like it could be, because sometimes, that is enough. And sometimes what we're putting in the bad category isn't necessarily bad. It's just frustrating or pisses us off.
Yeah. So how can somebody like determine? Because I remember when I was kind of evaluating things, and this is like prior to even getting separated that first time, I was like, well, we have this, but not this. And I was talking about like, what are my needs? And my friend said, well, maybe you should list what's important to you in a relationship or like what your needs are. And then see if like the top 3 are being met, like try to prioritize them in order. Is that something you get behind? You're looking at me quizzically.
Because it's like, I wanted to know that. I wanted to know, how do you know? When do you know? I really struggled a long time figuring out how to end my relationship. Because, right, that's what you're talking about. Is how do you know when it's time to end a relationship? And there is no formula. I mean, I really wish that there was. And there are books that say, here's how you figure it out. But I mean, for me, that didn't help me figure it out. I think to some extent we struggle and we suffer for a period of time, and then we either decide to end the relationship or not. For me, I ended my relationship because I couldn't see a future. But it was also like a variety of different issues that I knew weren't workable for me, whether that is a list of needs that aren't being filled or characteristics and qualities that are either there or not. I think really what it may come down to, though, is our partner's limitations and if we can accept them or not. And that includes their ability or inability to fulfill our needs, etc. And so for me, my ex's limitations, I knew that like I would make him feel like shit because of it, and I wouldn't be able to accept him, and it just wouldn't go well. So I think if we want to come up with some rules, if you're forcing me to do it, I think it has to do with that. It has to do with when we come to understand our partner's limitations, can we appreciate them and honor them and tolerate them and be like, some days I really fucking want to kill you, but I love you? Or is it just I want to kill you and I'm going to drive you crazy because I don't accept who you are and I want you to change? And if that's the case, that's, time to go to couples therapy. Say. And then I think leave it up to your therapist. I honestly don't think that we as people are capable to make these decisions because like, I don't know about you, but for a large portion of our relationship, especially towards the end, I was majorly triggered. And dysregulated and confused and didn't know a fucking thing. Even as a therapist, like emotionally, I was in a tailspin. I didn't know. I didn't get a class on relationships.
No, and
I mean,
when
I
you're
did. I'm a therapist, but like
you don't make the best decisions.
And everything seemed urgent, and nothing was urgent. And I really do think that couples, one, if you are in a relationship and you want it to end, most people are talking to everybody but their partner about it. Ending a relationship is a couple's issue, and no matter how scary it feels, you have to tell your partner, this is where I am, this is how serious it is, we have to do something about this. Because so many people are just like dropping hints here and there, or like having fights and saying, I can't do this anymore, but like really not honestly communicating. So I think that that's like the first thing. The second thing is, as I was saying, I don't think couples can do this alone. They need help, whether it's a therapist, a shaman, whatever else is out there. We need help. Both, even if we're not in a relationship, we need help. But especially if you're at that place with your partner, I wish I could go back and be in therapy with my partner in more of an intensive way. Not so it didn't end, but just so it ended differently. Instead of the rules of how to know, I think it's more of a process.
I get that. Instead of looking at the good, maybe look at what you're saying, like look at the limitations and then decide, is this something that I can live with? Instead of like, oh, they're this and that and that. It's like, oh, they're not this and that. But am I okay with that?
Right.
Interesting. You talk about a relationship being too good to leave and too bad to stay. And I know at least my audience has a lot of experience with this, because that was how I also felt in my marriage, where I was like, well, he's such a good guy and we have this amazing life. But again, that turmoil, and it's just so hard when you're in that situation where you feel like there's all that fear and anxiety, like, okay, I'm going to let go of a good person. But then it also feels like it's almost unfathomable to stay. But for me, I was paralyzed for so long from being like wedged between those two things.
Yeah, it's a lot of ambivalence. It's really hard. And it's true. Many relationships are great and also awful. My ex was great. He's a great guy. The relationship was a great relationship, but there were parts I just couldn't do. I mean, and that's why it's so hard to end a relationship, is because hopefully most of us are not with monsters, are not with abusive people. And that means that there's love there. And if we love and are attached to somebody, it's not just a simple thing of, well, I'm unhappy, so therefore ... goodbye. We have a connection. We're human beings, and it's not that easy to leave.
You talk about love and hate being two sides of the same coin. So does that apply here?
Yeah.
Okay. How?
I mean, if you're going to love somebody, it was like, I don't even know why, but it was a couple of years ago where I like hit a wall with people, just friends, everybody in general. And I was like, you know what? Everybody's really fucking annoying. I knew this, but it just like dawned on me, and like, And like, yeah, that's right. Everyone is really fucking annoying.
Mhm.
Everyone is hard to be with. Everyone that I love to death, I also fucking hate them.
Mhm.
Like, and I mean that in a loving way. People are really afraid of the word hate.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you're gonna love somebody deeply, they're also gonna really piss you off.
Mhm.
And that's one of the biggest challenges of relationships,
Mhm.
is they're gonna disappoint you. And that disappointment is gonna feel like they've literally mortally wounded you. And you're going to have to deal with that.
Mhm.
But yeah, two sides of the same coin.
Mhm.
Sometimes at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that was what I was thinking too. And that's when it gets so confusing. It's like
Co-occurring love and hate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How can people identify their triggers and figure out how to navigate those in relationships? Because relationships are like the most triggering thing ever.
The most.
Mhm.
I'm not into the like whole it's easy thing, but this is actually kind of easy. I mean, and some parts of relationships are as well, but specifically, one, knowing that you're going to be triggered, and two, figuring out what your triggers are, which is easy. You just know yourself. Like you have to become self-aware. If you want to have a good relationship, you have to know yourself.
Mm.
And that means not like I have this conversation with people and they're like, well, like 2 years ago. I'm like, no, not 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Like when you were a little scared child,
Mhm.
what happened?
Mhm.
What happened to your mother when she was a little scared child? Like you have to know not only yourself, but you have to know your intergenerational history too. And that's, for some people, it may sound like, oh my God, that's so much work. There's actually like not that much work. It's actually harder not to do that work and be triggered and feel urgent and reactive and act out your unresolved issues than it is to spend maybe a year in therapy or 6 months in an online course reflecting and learning about who you are and where you came from.
Mm.
Because those are our triggers. And then when you know your triggers, you can say, hey, partner, so I get really triggered because I was abandoned or neglected, or my mother's love was really inconsistent and it made me anxious. So when you pull away because you're tired from work, it really like fucking sets me off. So can you, when you come home, before you go into your office and shut the door, can you give me a hug and a kiss and tell me you love me, but you're tired and that you want to go and shut the door? As opposed to like banging on the door. Why are you in, like, I don't understand, but reactive.
Yeah.
And then you're really going to push your partners away. So you really want to know your triggers, and knowing your triggers is not that hard. You just have to know yourself. And again, that's your history, your childhood history, growing up, adolescence, everything.
I think one of the most counterintuitive things is the fact that we seek out partners who kind of reenact the dynamic that we had when we were younger, even if that dynamic was painful.
Yeah.
And I remember I had somebody on years ago, and, you know, not being a therapist or a mental health professional myself, I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. You would think that you would seek subconsciously somehow to like heal that part of yourself. Try to find the opposite of, you know, your caregivers or whatever. So why is it that
that's a reenactment too.
Oh, trying to find somebody like the opposite.
That's connected to wanting something you didn't get.
Yeah.
That's a reenactment.
True.
Then what happens is you pick that person who is nothing like what you grew up with. And at the beginning, it feels fun and exciting. And then you're like, holy shit, I don't want that. And they're nothing like what is familiar to you. And it feels weird.
So is that ultimately why, the familiarity aspect of it?
Or the unfamiliar aspects of it. But everybody we reenact everything. We get up on the same day. I mean, it's like, this is how we live. And no one's immune to it. Everybody reenacts some relationships are even based on, the entire dynamic is based on a reenactment. That's like when people are talking about attachment styles to death. They're really talking about is reenacting attachment styles with partners and choosing partners who parallel what they grew up with in one way or another. So as you're saying, if you, let's say someone grows up with with parents who are not affectionate and they choose a partner who is super affectionate, most of those people, when they're receiving that affection, are like, I don't know if I really actually want all of it.
Yeah.
Or they'll pick a partner who's not affectionate at all and have to work through the original issues that surface when their partner's not affectionate, which is, I really wanted to be held when I was a kid and now you're not holding me and it's really fucking triggering me. But everybody reenacts something.
Yeah. And you talk about how like we pick these partners that challenge us and then we expect them to or we feel entitled, right, to have
Mhm.
them like meet our needs in a
Yeah.
certain way.
I told you I want this, and because I told you,
Yeah.
you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the thing. Which, I mean, I told my partner they need to do something, and they need to do it because I told them. But it's not realistic.
Mm-hmm. Is that what you mean by like our emotions aren't always valid?
Yeah.
Does it apply to that situation?
Yeah. And by that, I mean like, so my partner went away and I freaked out. I became really, really freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he's not the best communicator,
Mm-hmm.
but like the intensity with which I felt was not about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to say my emotions weren't valid, but if I had used those emotions to react in the present towards him, that would have been a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
But I know, because I've been in therapy forever, that this is about my earlier stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the emotions are valid, but the older emotions are what's valid,
Mm-hmm.
not my reaction to what's happening in the present.
Yeah. I had one of those a couple weeks ago. Let
Yeah?
me tell you.
What?
Let me tell you what
Tell
I did.
me.
So I was sick. This was on a Saturday daytime. And we were supposed to have this big dinner that night. And I was like sick. We're hanging out, just watching TV. And he said, "Do you want me to cancel the dinner tonight?" And I said, "No, of course not." It was a girl no. I meant yes. and,
Yeah.
and he didn't.
Oh, no.
So then
Wait, why'd you say no and not yes?
I don't know. So then he was like, "Okay, I'm going to go, but then I'm going to come back here at like 9. I'm going to go
he
quickly."
had a dinner.
We had a
Oh, you both,
dinner
but he was
together,
okay,
and he
yeah,
goes,
yeah,
"Do you want
yeah,
me to cancel
got
the
it, got it,
dinner
got it,
because you're
got it.
sick?" And I
Yeah.
said, "No,
Right.
no." I was like, but secretly, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
So no. So then he's like, "Okay, I'm going to go to the dinner, but I'm going to come back here at like 9. This is like 7:30. I said, "Okay."
Oh no.
And
Did he come back at like 10?
No, he goes to dinner, and at this point I'm voice noting with my cousin, getting fired up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
he went to dinner, and then he texts me, "Can I get you anything? Are you okay? Love you." Like all these nice things. "Do you need anything? If you need something, I'll leave right now. I'll come." And I was like, do I need any? No, I don't need anything. He should just want to come just because.
Yeah.
And
You're
I was
I
like,
needed you to not go to dinner, you dumbass.
yeah. So at this point, I'm like pissed. And I was like, no, I don't need anything. I was like, I'm just going to go to bed. And he's like, okay, like feel better, love you, whatever. So then I'm like pissed.
Yeah.
And I carry it into the next day.
Oh, no.
And he's texting me, "Good morning. How do you feel?" And I was like, fine, like just doing that whole thing. And finally he came over and I was like, so I was a little disappointed. And I felt so bad. He was like,
Well, good for you for being open and honest and telling him.
and he said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I totally take the blame here. I just thought that you were maybe like me when I'm sick, which is like, I don't want to be around anybody." And that was the feeling that I was getting from what you were telling me. And he's like, "I don't know you in this situation because I've not been with you when you're sick before." And totally handled it like so well. But I had
That's a
such
nice
an
response.
emotional hangover for like days
Yeah.
from that. And then when I looked back on it, I was like, oh, I was giving him information with my responses that were like, no, leave, don't come over, no. And I was like expecting a different result.
Do you know why he did?
I think it was triggering for me because, yeah, like my partners in the past, especially my last partner, if I was not feeling well, was just like so dismissive and like, yeah, just dismissive. And that was something that was like reenacted from my childhood, I think. So I think that was why it was triggering for me.
And that's what you did when you were a kid in terms of
yes,
you denied having needs. You denied
yes,
yourself.
I couldn't
having needs. You
express
couldn't
it,
express
and
them.
then the needs weren't met,
Yeah.
and then I got really angry, and then that came out in other ways because I couldn't express it.
I mean, so many people, myself included, have that kind of default reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But like the important part is that you understand yourself, and after it happens, you're like, oh, this is what happened. I know why.
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to calmly talk about it with him. And it sounds like he was able to be responsive, which is really sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. He was like, I'm so sorry. He's like, I would always prioritize you like over my friends because I was like, you prioritize going out over sick girlfriend.
Did you tell him though about like the meaning behind it?
Yeah. So then
good.
So then the next
That's great.
night, sorry, everyone's like, we don't need to hear all of this.
Yes, we do.
That was on a Sunday. So then we were fine. And then on Monday, I still just like didn't feel, I felt anxious because I was like, I don't like how I handle that. And so, and I actually was like speaking somewhere about like emotional sobriety and like, I was like, whoa, I was not very emotionally sober in that moment. And so I said something to him again. And I was like, I just felt like that was kind of like old stuff coming up for me. And I put you kind of in like a
Did you tell him the old stuff though?
Yeah, I told him that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And he was like, oh, I didn't even like think about it.
Yeah.
It's totally not a big deal.
It's so important that like you share with your partner and they share with you your traumas and your stuff. So he knows like if you don't feel entitled to having certain needs, especially related to being taken care of or any version of special caretaking that we would want when sick or sad or upset or whatever, then he can be more aware of it and you can be more aware of it. And he could say, I know this is a touchy or triggering, whatever. I think I should probably stay home with you. Like he'll know and he can check in with you about that, which is why it's important that we know this shit about ourselves so then we can tell our partners so they know that shit about us. And you can not necessarily avoid conflict, but the more knowledge you have of that, the better you can connect.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like self-knowledge and self-awareness is more important than the self-love piece of things that we were talking about in the beginning.
It's kind of like self-esteem and all of this stuff. It's like, what is that stuff? What is that? What is self-love? I don't know what that means.
Different versions. Yeah, self-obsession. I mean, I think at least my algorithm would tell you self-love is like what I said before, like you're journaling, you're meditating, you're doing the bubble bath. You're like, that's like very wellness-y version of like self-love, whatever that means. But
sharing that stuff with him and understanding your history, I think that's self-love. Or just really great. Good for you, yay.
Thank you.
Bro.
Felt a little crazy, but...
It's not though.
Yeah.
And it's probably a great thing that happened.
Yeah.
Because now you know each other better.
Yeah.
So
totally.
Like, that's a win. It just sucks because I know that when this stuff comes up, when we get dysregulated and just so emotionally overwhelmed to the place where it's like, I fucking hate them. I can't believe this. No matter how much insight we may have, it's really a lot of suffering. Like it really sucks. And it can go on for days. It can be really hard to let go of.
I mean, do you feel like any kind of like confrontation is better than no communication at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I was in a relationship where we didn't communicate at all, except for like every 6 months when things would blow over and we would have these confrontations. And then we always like felt so much love for one another after.
Yeah.
And it was probably some kind of like unhealthy cycle, but also because like when you get it out there, it's just doesn't poison the relationship because I feel like it just turns into resentment.
Yeah. When you can be heard, acknowledged, understood, or at least like listened to, that can be really impactful and powerful to dissolve some of that shit.
Well, you talk about in your book about developing like an appreciation for the ups and downs. And I think that people don't think about that. They think about developing an appreciation for the ups, but the downs are bad. Do you feel like you have an appreciation for all of it now, including like all the dating stuff and everything post breakup with Alex?
I think so. Yes. I mean, like in my current relationship, I have an appreciation and expectation that there are going to be ups and downs. And like, I think I can tolerate it a lot better. Maybe too much. I don't know. But I certainly don't have some of the expectations that I had when I was younger about getting all of my needs fulfilled by one person. The biggest thing I learned from my relationship was and doing what I do is that, we're constantly triggered, we have to know ourselves, and two, like, you need to be a person outside of your relationship. Like my ex and I, we were each other's everything, and it was cute until it wasn't cute, until he disappointed me. And then all my life was defined by that disappointment because I wasn't really connected to in a real way to other areas of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So friends, work, all that kind of stuff. That, you know, one person really cannot, they're not going to be able to do it for you. And if you set up your life like that, you're going to be kind of fucked.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to feel really bad.
That's an amazing note to end on.
Yeah, you're going to be fucked.
It's great advice, though, because so many people forget that. And it's when you're dating somebody new and in a new relationship, it's fun and exciting and you want to be with that person all the time. And it's easy to get kind of caught up in that, I think. I know for myself, I keep saying this, but I'm so grateful to be dating like at this stage in my life where I have a career and I have like friends and money and all this stuff, and I don't need anything. No. I always needed something from somebody up until this point in my life. And obviously, I mean, we're talking about needs. There's different emotional needs, things like that, and that's okay. But like, I'm good on my own. It's such a different place to be approaching dating and relationships from.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much more stable and empowered place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure.
Amazing. Well, tell everybody where they can find your book.
You can buy my book, How to Listen Without Losing Your Mind, anywhere on all of the websites that sell books. And you can find me on Instagram at YourDiagNonsense or my website at toddsbaratz.com. I wish I made my website like blueandgreen.com because it's like my fucking name is like, what? No one can spell that. Go to my Instagram.
We'll link it in the show notes too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, dear. It's good to see you.
You too.